I want to welcome our viewers to a special podcast. We have a resident of Overture that's going to be with us this afternoon, and we're going to talk. We talk community. That's our theme, and so to develop community, we want to get people involved. And so sometimes people think, well, bingo. They think of activities, but they don't think of the learning aspect of it. So I'm going to call him Professor Robert, but that's because I want you guys to have a better idea of who's going to be listening. But Robert, would you share with our viewers who you are and maybe a tiny bit about your background so they can understand who's teaching this philosophy class?
Well, my name's Robert Rhoads, and I've been here at Overture for about 2.5 years. And I've done a lot of things in my life, and what applies to this is I've taught part-time in the philosophy department at Washtenaw Community College, and I'm in my 20th year.
Wow.
I've taught introductory philosophy classes, but mostly because I also have a background in healthcare, I've taught medical ethics. And that's what I have taught solely for about the last 5 years. I really don't know how this got started here.
Mm-hmm.
As best I can remember, there was some discussion came up and some philosophical things came out in the discussion, and somebody said, well, I wish I knew more about this. And I said, well, let's put a little class together. Now, calling it a class is maybe stretching the truth a little bit. I do have a basic outline of material that I plan to cover, but it's open to free discussion as long as it applies to the subject in some way.
Sure.
And I think one of the big things that people get out of it is being able to share experiences that relate to what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lesson plan that I pass out, and there are several people that take those lesson plans as holy writ.
Mm-hmm.
They take them home, they look up every term on them that they don't know, they come back with a couple or 3 pages of notes that they've made on this because they're really committed to learning as much about this as possible.
Right.
Other people who pop in and out every week or two, but they always add something to the discussion.
Sure.
And I don't push anybody one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I told people when we started this was that I would guarantee to them that I would not do or bring up anything controversial.
Okay.
And I've kind of edged that a little bit in that with some controversial topics, what I have done is provided just some factual information. Haven't taken sides one way or another, just to say this is what really is.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that, someone at one point brought up something about evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And Darwin, and I pointed out that the concept of evolution wasn't invented by Darwin, it was invented by the ancient Greeks. And there had been many people throughout history that had promoted various ideas about how evolution worked. And what Darwin did, he came up with a mechanism for how it worked. But he wasn't the one that came up with the initial idea. And I think that those kinds of factual clarifications are important for people to think about things as critically as they can.
Sure. You know, it brings up a topic that I hear on our wellness that talks about critical thinking is a dying art amongst the young people who have gotten attached to the digital phone. And so they're not thinking, they're just using the digital phone as their thinking method. So speak to our residents or the viewers about how important it is from a teacher's standpoint that students continue to learn. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I don't think that anyone, student or not, should pass a day without learning something.
I agree.
I was going to say that this is an opinion on my part, but some studies that have come out in the last couple of weeks bolster this, and that is that the state of education in this country is pitiful.
Right. I'd agree.
That being said, the high school that I substituted in Ann Arbor, the students there had to take a class in critical thinking every year they were in high school. And these kids were sharp. As far as, these were high school kids now.
Right.
But as far as factual information, when I was teaching in-person classes, most of the students that I taught were second-year college students.
Mm-hmm.
And they had little or no understanding of history, geography, civics. It was pitiful because I would try to make analogies or comparisons or whatever with something that we were studying with something else, and they had no idea what I was talking about. And I think one of the more blaring ones was when we were studying the ethics of Adam Smith.
Right.
And I said, Adam Smith also published the major text on capitalism, which is the Wealth of Nations,
Right.
which incidentally came out in 1776.
Wow. I don't think anybody knows or thinks that, because they think of it as a document, a book that's fairly recent. Not recent, but, not
So
that.
I said, so what else happened in 1776?
Yeah, it's a good. No, they didn't know? They didn't know?
Nothing but blank faces.
Wow.
And
Man.
these were kids in their second year of college.
Yeah. Whew.
So then when I would make reference to things that were, shall we say, more esoteric than that,
Right.
I was guaranteed of getting
Blank stare.
blank stares.
Yeah.
And I had to backtrack and explain all of the detail leading up to that, which took a lot of time out of class.
Sure.
I think probably the students got a bit from it than they might would have if we just followed it, had them read the book.
Right.
And I don't know.
Well, I think John Maxwell wrote a book on critical thinking about 10 years ago, I think. And I bought it and I read it. And then I have a golfing buddy at Pine Tree, and he's a high school teacher. And when he went through COVID, we talked about, how that went. And he said, the trouble with the kids today is they're just trying to regurgitate a grade. So they just learn it just so they can spit out a grade, not thinking that they're preparing themselves. So, and then he saw it on the Zoom that, whatever they were trying to do is just get a grade and move on. Now, how can you talk to our listeners that are more, let's say, in Overture. So they're retired, obviously more than 55. But how important is it for even the older people to benefit from more than bingo? This is obviously something that bingo's fun, but it has its place. So talk about what you've seen your students, or let's just say people that participate in your class. What have they said to you that they've benefited from being a part of philosophy class?
I had one student say to me that she saw this as the most important hour of her week.
Wow. That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah, I was kind of bowled over by that. And I think the fact that at least thus far, and we've been doing this over a year, everybody that's been there has been very accepting.
Right.
I have not had anybody bristle their feathers and say, well, you're da-da-da-da-da-dum and whatever. Like we had happen this last week where a resident made a statement that was highly offensive to a number of people that were present.
Right.
We just haven't had any of that, which I think is extremely good.
Well, I think, don't you see that our residents are, at least a high percentage, want to learn? They don't just come here to coast to whatever.
Yeah. And a high percentage of them are well educated.
Yes, I agree. I remember one situation, I won't mention names, but I had come down and they were breaking out, and so we got in a discussion with a couple of your students. And so it was funny because I don't even remember the question as much as the answer that you had them trying to figure out was get off the train. So whatever you put them through exercise, the two people I was talking to, we were chatting and they brought up that situation and they said, get off the train. It was like absolutely funny because you're getting people to think about whatever that situation was, that there wasn't an obvious answer. They had to answer it in a way that they were thinking and figuring out whatever you were taking them through whatever exercise.
There are a number of permutations of that, and one that I frequently use in addition to the train one is somebody gives you a card and it says on one side of the card, the statement on the other side of this card is true. So you flip it over and it says the statement on the other side of this card is false. What do? And people go nuts trying to figure it out.
Right.
And the answer is you throw the card away.
Yeah, I love it.
Don't waste time with it.
Yeah. Sometimes there's a book that my partner gave me about a couple years ago, Obvious Adam. And it's a real short book, but it's obvious things that people try to complicate, but it's really obvious and simple.
Oh, yeah.
But we think, well, it's got to be something tricky to it. I mean, it's not tricky, it's simple, but we complicate it sometimes by thinking there's an angle to it. Mm-hmm. So in your class, tell our viewers when you teach it and what your plans for the fall.
Okay, well, what we meet on Tuesday afternoons or evening at 7 to 8.
Okay.
We're only scheduled for an hour. We've never finished early, but several times we've gone over a few minutes, and there have been a few occasions where we've ended and some of the people have stayed to talk with each other. We just finished, we'd started into the Scottish Enlightenment and talking about David Hume. And I decided that I would ask the class, the attendees, where they'd like to see it go.
Mm-hmm.
And one person said that they had missed the first part of this,
Right.
and they would like to go back and revisit critical thinking and fallacies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're working on now. And when we do something like this, I try to find things online that I can print off for a handout.
I got you.
And I have handouts for both of those two topics. And, we may cover one item on the discussion in a week, or we may go through half a dozen.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how things move, and there's nothing
Sure.
that says it's got to be this way or that.
Awesome. What about, this is behind the scenes, so you can plead the fifth and not say anything. So do you bounce some of your thoughts off Nancy before you come or during the week, or is it completely separate where you just go into your class with what you have in mind?
I just go into my class with what I have,
Okay.
but I have, I won't say frequently, but on occasion, had things that come up in the discussion that I'll come back and talk with her about.
Awesome. Okay, so there's rumors around here that you have some experience in identifying plants and different. Now, I'm not going to say where I got it from. Can you share with our viewers when it comes to gardening and things that are kind of off topic of philosophy? I know you don't talk to the flowers, but let's give our viewers a little idea of what you're doing out there in the gardening area.
All I have done is the places that I've lived previously have had an herb garden.
Mm-hmm.
And typically what happens is I buy the plants, and Nancy and I put them out, and she takes care of them, and I use them in cooking.
Right.
So
Awesome.
that's it.
So you're using fresh herbs in your cooking?
Every time I can.
Wow.
It's not like last night I had some Australian sea bass
Mm-hmm.
that I sauteed in a little bit of olive oil,
Mm-hmm.
and then I put some white wine and a little bit of pepper and a little salt into the pan and deglazed it, and threw in what did I have? A finely minced shallot and a handful of parsley that came out of our herb garden that's on our deck.
Okay.
And made the sauce and poured it over. It was really good.
Well, I tell you what you're doing is you're making our viewers hungry. So should they come to your apartment and eat a particular night? Is it
Only if I know in advance that they're coming, because
Okay.
I usually only cook for two.
okay? Well, I tell you what we'll do for future episodes. It's always cooking is a wonderful thing, and especially when you know how to use herbs. Because not that I'm a good cook, but I'm learning, and I'm always testing things. I like the air fryer. Somebody told me about that, and I already had one, so I started doing vegetables in it, put seasonings on it, and it's been really good because I was only eating soups from Costco. So I've expanded my horizon by putting different seasonings on basic stuff and putting them in there. So we'll save that. But yeah, you have something
I was
to
just
share.
going to say, we have a division of task. I do like 98% of the cooking,
Mm-hmm.
and Nancy does like 98% of the baking.
Okay, gotcha.
So she is like brilliant on. Well, one of the things she really likes is tarts.
Oh yeah. So like fruit tarts and different things like
cakes,
Mhm.
pies, brownies, muffins, all of those kinds of
Right.
things. I'm not so good at baking. I'll do say an Irish soda bread sometimes, and I just don't do much of that. But I do like all of our evening meals.
Well, what we'll do, because one of the things we're going to put in the magazines is the residents' favorite recipes, and allow people to understand different tastes. And of course, they know who made them, so they can come back and ask questions if they do have questions about how they were able to replicate that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and you know, when you think about cooking and baking are two different animals.
Absolutely.
And usually you find, at least I've found, they don't mix. It's not like I'm a good baker and a good cook. It's like I like baking or I like cooking. And so it's not surprising that you said that about the difference between y'all's two cooking skills. And it really is. Baking's a whole different animal. And cooking is those sautés, those spices, those sauces, and all that. And that's because I come from the restaurant business. I was there 13 years. So I understand hanging around chefs, the different, I'd hang around pastry chefs and I'd hang around regular chefs that would do that. So what we'll do for future episodes is we'll dive deeper into that, because I think we're faced with here at Overture is cooking for ourselves. It's not like we have a cafeteria or they serve us 2 meals, a day. So residents have to figure out cooking, and it's not as easy, especially if you didn't cook in the past. Now you're having to figure it out. So that would be good to go diving in, especially herbs. I think herbs are like a wonderful topic, because the taste of herbs and the difference in what they go with on different meals is really an art. You have to really play with it and see which herbs go with what. So as we wind down here on the philosophy, and so what would somebody do if they're just moving in, they're really interested in continuing to learn? Would they be able to contact you to be able to participate in it?
Absolutely. But the best thing is just show up on Tuesday at 7.
Okay. All right. That's good.
And one thing I forgot to mention is that there is a book associated with the class
Okay. Awesome.
that is very loosely associated with it. But a couple of the people have gotten it and have said that they really have enjoyed reading it.
Well, I think, I know people will do handouts. I'm a fan of books, and then writing in the books and kind of learning it after the class, before the class, just kind of digesting it all. So those books, I guess it's available on Amazon, I'm guessing.
That's where I got mine.
Yeah, there's not too many things that aren't on Amazon. I'm looking at 2 of your packages over in the corner, so I think you're used to using Amazon. Would that be correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I ran into a friend, and see, I have a couple books, and I said, you can order on Amazon. He goes, I don't have Amazon. I said, how old are you? And he's my age. And he goes, no, I don't. I said, your wife has it, right? No, she doesn't have it either. She said, oh, Rachel has it, one of his daughters. And that was the first time I've run into anybody that doesn't have access right there with an Amazon account, because you can get it, as you know, in a day or sometimes 2. So it's pretty good. We'll put a link in the show notes so people will know where to find it on Amazon, so you're not getting questions, what's that book you're using? So they can just look in the notes. And so as we wind down, because we have other things that I know you got to get to, what parting thoughts can you give our viewers on just, again, the benefits of really critical thinking? I love that topic.
Well, I actually would say 2 things. First is, don't be afraid about coming down.
Right.
Don't feel like, oh, well, I don't know anything about this, and I'll look like an idiot, and I'll be afraid to say anything, or those kinds of things. Yeah, none of that matters.
Right.
And as far as the value of critical thinking, anytime you make a decision and you think about it, you want to make sure that your thought processes are working as efficiently and effectively as possible.
Yep.
Now, I'm not talking about this in the sense of thought processes from a chemical or biochemical sort of way, because I think probably everyone here, including myself, have some challenges in those respects simply because we're older.
Right.
But what I'm talking about is the structure of how you put your thoughts together.
Right.
I had an exercise I gave to a student. This was early on after I started teaching. That was a way of doing critical thinking. And I ran into her a couple of semesters later, and I just asked her how she was doing, and she said, well, I wanted to tell you something. You know that exercise that we did? She said, I've been going through a terrible thing with my husband's family. They're split, and we're sort of stuck in the middle. And I decided one, I think she said Saturday afternoon, that I was going to sit down and apply this idea to this problem. And I said, well, did it solve the problem? And she said, no. But it helped me understand where both of them were coming from.
Interesting. That's really what you want.
And I said, wow, I don't know that I've gotten a better compliment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And thinking doesn't solve every problem, but it certainly helps if you'll think critically about things. There's a guy that I really like. He's Jim Quick, and he's done about 800 podcasts on the brain. And he had a broken brain when he was little, and it's put him on a journey. And he just said the brain's a muscle. If you don't use it, it's going to get weak. Mm-hmm. So for our listeners, the muscles are right around our body, but they're between our ears too.
That's true.
Yeah, but we don't see it, so sometimes we forget about it. And critical thinking and philosophy will help you exercise that muscle between your ears. And that, we appreciate you teaching it and leading it. And so we want to encourage others that maybe have thought about it to come on down on Tuesday night, and they can get some critical thinking and learn something, and, of course, exercise that brain. Okay, last thought there, Robert, for our listeners. Any parting thought?
People bring drinks, snacks.
Yep.
Very informal.
Okay.
You can come in your pajamas.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So,
See, that's casual right there.
Yeah.
You don't have to dress up, I'm guessing.
Right.
Yes, that's good.
So I hope to see you on Tuesday.
Awesome. We appreciate you, Robert, sharing with our viewers a little bit about the philosophy class, and we know more will get involved. Thank you.